In a world drowning in noise, endless notifications, heated arguments, and fleeting opinions, what if the secret to true strength isn't speaking louder, but thinking deeper? Welcome to ZenLite 8, where we uncover the timeless wisdom of Stoicism to transform chaos into clarity. Today, we dive into Marcus Aurelius' powerful lesson. Speak less, think more. Ready to discover how silence can become your superpower? Let's get started. In a world that never stops talking, where notifications ping relentlessly, opinions clash like cymbals, and every moment demands a response, silence feels like a forgotten art. We're bombarded by a constant stream of voices, on social media, in meetings, even in our own heads, urging us to react, to comment, to be heard. But what if the greatest power lies not in adding to the noise, but in stepping back from it? What if, in the quiet spaces we so rarely allow ourselves, we find not emptiness, but strength? The Stoics, those ancient philosophers who faced their own chaotic world with unshakable calm, understood this truth deeply. Their silence wasn't born of fear or hesitation. It was a deliberate act of mastery, a choice to think before speaking, to let clarity emerge from contemplation. On this journey, let's explore how silence can become your superpower, not by withdrawing from life, but by engaging with it more intentionally, more powerfully, than words alone ever could. Imagine standing in the middle of Times Square, surrounded by flashing billboards, honking taxis, and a sea of voices shouting for attention. That's modern life, a sensory overload that drowns out reflection. We're conditioned to believe that to matter, we must be loud, visible, quick to respond. Scroll through any social media feed, and you'll see it. Endless threads of arguments, hot takes fired off without a second thought, words piling up like debris in a storm. But the Stoics would pause here. They'd see this frenzy for what it is, a distraction from the deeper work of understanding. Their silence was a rebellion against chaos, a refusal to let the world's pace dictate their own. Picture Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, sitting alone at dawn, scribbling in his journal not to impress others, but to anchor himself. His silence wasn't absence. It was presence, a steady hand steering his thoughts through the turbulence of life. In our own time, we can learn from this. Silence isn't about hiding, it's about choosing when to engage and doing so with purpose. Consider a real moment from today's world. A heated team meeting where everyone's talking over each other, ideas colliding without resolution. One person stays quiet, not out of disinterest, but because they're listening, processing, weighing each perspective. When they finally speak, a single, clear sentence. It cuts through the noise like a lighthouse beam through fog. The room pauses. Heads turn. Why? Because their words, born from silence, carry weight. They've done the inner work of sorting through the clutter, and what emerges isn't just an opinion, but insight. This is the Stoic way, not to dominate with volume, but to influence with clarity. I've seen this in everyday life too. A friend of mine, a teacher in Chicago, faced a classroom erupting with restless teenagers, each vying for attention. Instead of shouting, she stood still, her calm gaze sweeping the room. Slowly, the chatter faded. Her silence wasn't passive. It was magnetic, a signal that something meaningful was coming. When she spoke, her students leaned in, not because she demanded it, but because her quiet had earned it. Silence, in this sense, is a form of courage. It takes guts to hold back when the world rewards impulsiveness. Think about the last time you felt the urge to jump into an argument. Maybe online, where a snarky reply could have scored quick points, or at a family dinner, where a sharp retort sat ready on your tongue. It's tempting to fire off those words, to feel the rush of being heard. But the Stoics ask us to pause, to ask, what's the cost? Words spoken in haste often unravel trust, muddy understanding, or leave us regretting what we can't unsay. Silence, on the other hand, builds a bridge to wisdom. It's the space where we wrestle with our impulses, where we choose the second thought over the first. I think of a story about a young lawyer in New York, overwhelmed by the pressure to impress her firm. She used to fill every meeting with ideas, hoping to stand out. But one day, advised by a mentor, she tried listening instead, really listening. She noticed her colleagues' hesitations, their unspoken concerns. When she finally spoke, her suggestions were precise, addressing what others missed. That shift didn't just earn her respect, it changed how she saw herself. Silence became her tool for confidence, not competition. This kind of silence isn't cold or distant. It's warm, intentional, alive. It's not about shutting down or avoiding conflict. It's about showing up fully, with focus. When we embrace silence, we give ourselves permission to think deeply, to notice the world's subtleties. Picture a quiet morning walk in a park, the kind you might take in Seattle or Austin, where the rustle of leaves and distant hum of life feel louder than any podcast. In that stillness, your mind unclenches. Ideas connect. Problems that seemed insurmountable shrink into perspective. The Stoics knew this intuitively. They sought silence not to escape, but to engage with life's complexities more honestly. Epictetus, a former slave turned philosopher, taught that we're given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, to listen twice as much as we speak. That ratio isn't just practical. It's profound. It reminds us that understanding precedes expression, that silence is the soil where empathy and insight grow. But let's be real, silence isn't always easy. We live in a culture that equates quiet with weakness, where pausing can feel like falling behind. Scroll through LinkedIn, and you'll see the hustle glorified. Speak up, stand out, never stop. Yet the Stoics challenged this. They'd argue that true strength isn't in how many words you scatter, but in how few you need to make a difference. Look at leaders who embody this. Someone like Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO, known for his thoughtful pauses during interviews. His silence isn't indecision. It's deliberation, a sign he's processing, not performing. That's the Stoic ideal in action. A mind steady enough to wait, clear enough to act. For us, this might mean small, daily choices, letting a colleague finish their thought without interrupting, or taking a breath before answering a tough question. These moments of silence aren't voids. They're investments in clarity, in relationships, in our own growth. Silence also teaches us resilience. In a world that thrives on instant gratification, choosing to pause is an act of defiance. It says, I don't need to react to everything. I choose my battles. This isn't about being aloof, it's about being grounded. Think of a parent in a bustling Atlanta suburb, juggling work calls and kids' tantrums. When chaos peaks, their calm silence, a steady look, a gentle hand, can reset the room. That's power, not passivity. The Stoics saw silence as a shield, protecting us from our own rashness and the world's provocations. By stepping back, we gain perspective, like an artist stepping away from the canvas to see the whole picture. We begin to notice what matters. The tremor in a friend's voice, the unspoken gratitude in a stranger's eyes. Silence sharpens our senses, making us not just better speakers, but better humans. As we embrace this quiet strength, we start to see its ripple effects. Silence doesn't just clarify our thoughts, it elevates our presence. It invites others to lean in, to trust us, because they sense we're not here to dominate but to understand. Yet this power of silence is only the beginning. To wield it fully, we must learn to pair it with restraint, a discipline that transforms not just how we speak, but how we live. We live in a world that celebrates speed, fast replies, instant posts, words flung into the void before thoughts can catch up. It's easy to mistake this rush for strength, to think that filling every silence proves you're engaged, alive, in control. But the Stoics saw through this illusion. They understood that true power lies not in how quickly you speak, but in how deliberately you choose to hold back. Restraint, they taught, is not passivity. It's presence honed to a fine edge, a conscious act of steering your voice through the chaos with purpose. Epictetus, with his sharp clarity, reminded us we're given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, to listen twice as much as we speak. This isn't just a quip. It's a blueprint for living with intention, for letting observation shape understanding before words shape outcomes. And when we do speak, those words carry a weight that lingers far beyond the moment they're spoken. Marcus Aurelius urged us to let our speech be true and useful, knowing that words are not fleeting. They're bricks, capable of building bridges or breaking trust. Let's dive into this Stoic wisdom, exploring how restraint becomes our strength and how the words we choose echo through our lives and the lives of others, shaping reality with every syllable. Imagine you're at a bustling coffee shop in Portland, the kind where laptops hum and conversations overlap like waves. Someone at the next table is venting loudly about a work drama, their voice rising with every sentence, pulling eyes from every corner. You feel the urge to jump in, maybe to agree, to counter, or just to be heard. It's human nature. We're wired to connect, to respond. But pause for a moment. What if, instead of adding to the clamor, you stayed quiet, letting their words settle, noticing the frustration behind their tone? That pause is where restraint begins, not as a retreat, but as a reclaiming of your power. The Stoics saw restraint as a form of mastery, a way to govern the impulse that drives us to speak before we think. EPICTETUS wasn't suggesting we become mute. He was pointing to a deeper truth. Listening is the foundation of understanding, and understanding is the root of influence. When we hold back, we create space to see clearly, to catch the tremor in a voice, the hesitation in a phrase, the unspoken need beneath the words. This isn't just about being polite. It's about being present, fully anchored in the moment. Restraint transforms how we show up in the world. Think of a time you've been in a heated debate, maybe at a town hall in Austin or a family gathering in Chicago. Voices escalate, each person digging in, more focused on winning than connecting. But then someone pauses. They don't interrupt. They listen, nod, and when they speak, it's measured, thoughtful. Like a stone dropped into a pond, sending ripples that calm the storm. That's restraint in action, not weakness, but strength refined. I saw this once in a community center in Atlanta, where a local leader faced a room of frustrated residents. Instead of matching their anger with defensiveness, she stood quietly, letting their concerns pour out. Her silence wasn't avoidance. It was respect, a signal she valued their voices. When she finally spoke, her words, simple, direct, carried a weight that shifted the room from chaos to dialogue. Restraint gave her authority, not because she demanded it, but because she earned it through presence. This discipline isn't easy. Our culture rewards the loudest voices. Think of the viral rants that rack up likes or the pundits who dominate airwaves with relentless sound bites. Restraint feels counterintuitive when every platform screams for your take, your comment, your clapback. But the Stoics knew the ego thrives on noise, craves the spotlight, the quick win, the fleeting rush of being heard. Restraint, though, is the ego's quiet conqueror. It asks us to step back, to question. Is this worth saying? Will it build or break? In that pause lies freedom, the freedom to choose wisdom over reaction. I think of a friend, a software engineer in San Francisco, who used to dominate every meeting with ideas, worried silence would make him seem irrelevant. But after a mentor's advice, he tried holding back, listening to his team's perspectives first. The result? His contributions, when they came, were sharper, more collaborative. His restraint didn't diminish him. It elevated him, turning his voice into one others sought out. Restraint also deepens our connections. When we listen more than we speak, we notice what others miss. The colleague who deflects praise but craves acknowledgement. The neighbor whose small talk hides loneliness. In a small town in Colorado, I met a librarian who embodied this. She rarely spoke at community events, but when she did, her words landed like poetry, because she'd spent hours listening to people's stories at her desk. Her restraint wasn't shyness. It was empathy, a gift that made others feel seen. The Stoics would nod here, knowing that restraint lets us observe the nuances that hasty words obscure. It's like tuning an instrument. Silence sharpens the notes we play, making them resonate. EPICTETUS wisdom echoes in everyday moments. The parent who pauses before scolding, the friend who waits to offer advice until it's asked for. These acts of restraint don't just diffuse tension, they build trust, because they show we're here to understand, not to dominate. But restraint isn't just about holding back. It's about preparing to speak with purpose. Because when we do choose to speak, our words carry a gravity that can shape lives. Words aren't feathers, drifting away on the breeze. They're bricks, as Marcus Aurelius understood, each one laid with intention to construct or destroy. Every sentence we utter plants a seed, in someone's heart, in their memory, in the fabric of who we are. Think about the last time someone's words stayed with you. Maybe it was a teacher in high school, standing at the front of a classroom in Dallas, who said, "You're capable of more than you think." Those words weren't loud or flashy, but they built something in you, a foundation you still draw from. Or maybe it was a careless remark, a friend's offhand jab at a party in Miami, that stung longer than they intended. Words, once spoken, take on a life of their own, echoing far beyond the moment they're born. This is why the Stoics treated speech with reverence. Marcus Aurelius didn't just urge us to speak truth. He asked us to ensure our words serve a purpose, to ask if they're necessary, if they're kind, if they align with virtue. In today's world, where a single tweet can spark a firestorm or a heartfelt note can mend a rift, this feels more urgent than ever. Consider a story from a hospital in Boston, where a nurse faced a grieving family. The room was thick with sorrow, questions hanging unanswered. Instead of filling the silence with platitudes, she spoke sparingly. "I'm here with you." Those 4 words, chosen with care, didn't erase the pain, but they built a bridge to comfort, proving that less can be profoundly more. Words like these don't just communicate. They connect, they heal, they endure. Yet we often underestimate this power. We toss out opinions like confetti, on group chats, in comment sections, at dinner tables, expecting them to vanish. But they don't. They linger, shaping how others see us, how we see ourselves. I remember a coworker in Seattle who vented about a project's failure in a team Slack channel, not realizing her words would erode her team's confidence in her. Months later, she was still repairing the damage, not because her frustration wasn't valid, but because her delivery was reckless. The Stoics would have urged her to pause, to filter her thoughts through reason. Is it true? Is it necessary? Does it serve? These questions aren't just a checklist. They're a compass, guiding our words to clarity rather than chaos. This weight of words isn't just about their impact on others. It's about their impact on us. Every time we speak without thinking, we chip away at our own integrity. Careless speech is like a crack in a mirror. It distorts how we reflect the world. I think of a young entrepreneur in New York, eager to pitch his startup to investors. In his excitement, he overpromised, filling the room with bold claims he couldn't back up. The investors smiled politely, but the deal fell through. Later, he told me the real loss wasn't the funding. It was his confidence in his own voice. The Stoics would see this as a lesson. Words spoken without grounding erode trust, not just in others, but in ourselves. When we speak with intention, though, we build something solid. Each word becomes a brick in a foundation of credibility, a testament to who we are. Words also shape our reality in subtler ways. They're not just tools for communication, they're tools for creation. Think of the stories we tell ourselves. "I'm not good enough," or "I'll figure this out." Those internal words, repeated over time, become the architecture of our mindset. The Stoics knew this, which is why they guarded their speech even in private. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, not to impress, but to refine, to ensure his words aligned with reason. In a small bookstore in Minneapolis, I once overheard a writer reading her poetry aloud to herself, testing each line for truth. Her quiet focus reminded me of this Stoic practice. Words, even unspoken, carry power to shape our inner world. When we choose them carefully, we don't just communicate better, we live better. But wielding this power isn't about perfection. It's about awareness. We'll stumble. We'll say things we regret. The Stoics weren't flawless orators. They were human, striving for virtue. What set them apart was their commitment to pause, to reflect, to learn. In a boardroom in Los Angeles, I watched a CEO apologize for a hasty comment that had upset her team. Her words, "I spoke too quickly, and I'll do better," didn't erase the mistake, but they rebuilt respect because they came from humility. That's the Stoic way. Not to avoid errors, but to grow through them, to let each misstep sharpen our restraint and refine our speech. This dance between restraint and speech teaches us something profound. Our words are a responsibility. They're not just sounds we make, they're choices we live with. In a world quick to judge and quicker to forget, the Stoics offer a timeless challenge: to speak less, but mean more. To let our silence be a canvas, our words a brush, painting moments of clarity and connection. Yet this journey doesn't end with what we say. It begins with how we listen, how we open ourselves to others' voices, building a deeper wisdom that transforms not just our speech, but our souls. In a world that never stops talking, where every pause feels like an invitation to interrupt, listening has become a rare and revolutionary act. We're surrounded by voices, on screens, in meetings, across crowded rooms, each one vying for attention, demanding a response. It's tempting to think listening is just waiting for your turn to speak, a polite pause before you jump in with your own story or solution. But the Stoics saw listening differently. To them, it wasn't a passive habit. It was a virtue, a deliberate choice to set aside your ego and truly meet another person where they are. Seneca wrote that true friendship blooms when we understand and are understood, and understanding begins with quiet, intentional attention. Listening, in this way, is a bridge to connection, a way to touch someone's world without imposing your own. And just as listening shapes our relationships with others, the way we speak to ourselves shapes our relationship with our own soul. Marcus Aurelius, through his private meditations, taught us that our inner dialogue must be disciplined, a garden tended with care to root out negativity and cultivate clarity. These two practices, listening outwardly and reflecting inwardly, are the heartbeat of a Stoic life, guiding us to live with empathy, wisdom, and purpose. Let's explore how they weave together, transforming not just how we connect, but who we become. Picture yourself at a bustling farmer's market in Seattle, the air alive with vendors calling out, kids laughing, and friends catching up over coffee. Amid the chatter, you spot an elderly man selling honey, his weathered hands arranging jars with quiet pride. You ask about his work, and instead of rushing through a sales pitch, he pauses, smiles, and tells you about the bees, the seasons, the care behind each batch. You don't just hear his words, you feel his story, because you've chosen to listen, really listen. That moment of attention isn't just a transaction. It's a connection, a fleeting but profound meeting of lives. The Stoics would see this as listening's true power, not waiting for your turn, but opening your heart to someone else's truth. Seneca's words ring here: to understand another is to honor them, to give them space to unfold without judgment or agenda. In a culture obsessed with self-expression, where social media scrolls brim with monologues, this kind of listening feels radical. It's not about nodding politely while your mind races to respond. It's about being present, fully anchored in the now. Listening like this changes everything. Think of a time you felt truly heard. Maybe it was a friend in Chicago who sat with you after a rough day, not offering fixes, just letting your words spill out. Or a teacher in Atlanta who remembered a quiet comment you made weeks ago, weaving it into a lesson that made you feel seen. Those moments stick with us not because of what was said, but because of how it felt to be received. The Stoics understood this alchemy. They knew listening isn't passive. It's active, a discipline that demands humility. It asks us to silence the inner chatter, the urge to interrupt with our own story or advice. I saw this once in a community center in Denver, where a counselor worked with teens from tough backgrounds. Instead of lecturing, she listened, really listened, to their frustrations, their dreams. One boy, usually guarded, opened up about his fear of failing school. Her quiet attention didn't just earn his trust. It gave him courage to keep going. That's what listening does. It builds bridges where walls once stood, creating space for others to shine. But listening's power goes beyond connection. It sharpens our minds. When we truly hear someone, we don't just absorb their words. We catch the undercurrents, the emotions and intentions woven between sentences. The Stoics were masters of this. They listened to friends, strangers, even critics, knowing every voice held a lesson. Epictetus taught that wisdom grows from openness, from letting others' perspectives challenge our own. In a boardroom in San Francisco, I watched a young manager transform her team by adopting this approach. She used to dominate meetings, quick to pitch solutions. But after a workshop on mindfulness, she started listening more, asking questions instead of asserting answers. She noticed her colleagues' hesitations, their unspoken ideas. Her questions drew out insights she'd never have found alone, and her team's creativity soared. Listening, she learned, wasn't just about understanding others. It was about growing herself, expanding her view of what's possible. This kind of listening also builds trust in ways words alone can't. In a small town in Ohio, a barber named Mike became a local legend, not for his haircuts, but for his ear. People, truck drivers, single moms, retirees, poured out their lives in his chair because he listened without judgment. He'd nod, ask a gentle question, or just stay quiet, letting their stories breathe. Mike didn't solve their problems, but he gave them something rarer, the feeling of being valued. The Stoics would smile at this, knowing that listening creates a sacred space where others feel safe to be themselves. It's a gift that costs nothing but means everything, especially in a world where attention is fractured by screens and schedules. When we listen like this, we don't just hear, we remember. Names, worries, dreams stick with us, not because we're trying to impress, but because we're present. And when we recall those details later, a colleague's mention of their kid's soccer game, a neighbor's quiet pride in a new job, it builds bonds that endure. Yet listening isn't just about others. It's a mirror for ourselves. The Stoics knew that to listen well outwardly, we must first listen inwardly, tending to the voice that shapes our thoughts. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his meditations for fame. He wrote them for himself, a private dialogue to wrestle with doubt, fear, and ambition. His journal was a space to question his motives, to prune negativity, to plant principles that guided him through Rome's chaos. This inner dialogue is where our true character forms. It's the voice that whispers when you're stuck in traffic in Los Angeles, tempted to snap at the world, or when you're alone in a quiet apartment in Boston, replaying a mistake. What do you say to yourself in those moments? Is it harsh, tearing you down? Or is it kind, building you up? The Stoics urge us to be deliberate here, to treat our inner speech with the same care we give our outer words. This discipline isn't easy. Our minds can be noisy, cluttered with self-doubt or resentment. I think of a friend, a nurse in Miami, who used to spiral after tough shifts, her inner voice blaming her for every patient she couldn't save. It wasn't until she started journaling, writing to herself like Marcus did, that she began to shift the narrative. She asked, "Is this thought true? Is it helpful?" Slowly, she replaced guilt with gratitude, focusing on the lives she touched. Her outer demeanor changed, too, calmer, more confident, because her inner dialogue had found clarity. The Stoics knew this secret. Our self-talk is the foundation of our reality. If it's chaotic, our actions follow suit. But if it's grounded, rooted in reason, it becomes a compass for living well. Tending this inner garden takes courage. It means facing truths we'd rather ignore, like the envy that creeps in when a coworker in New York gets promoted, or the fear that keeps you awake in a quiet suburb of Phoenix. Marcus Aurelius didn't shy from these shadows. He examined them, asking if they served his purpose. I saw this practice in a teacher in Minneapolis who started each day with 5 minutes of silence, reflecting on her goals, her doubts. She told me it was like clearing fog from a window. It let her see her students, her work, herself more clearly. This inner clarity shaped her classroom, where kids felt safe to learn because she was steady, not scattered. The Stoics would nod, knowing that a disciplined mind speaks with discipline, too. When we filter our thoughts, keeping what's true, pruning what's not, our outer words reflect that strength, landing with purpose instead of impulse. This inner work also frees us from the world's noise. Social media, with its endless scroll of comparison, can hijack our self-talk, whispering that we're not enough. But the Stoics, long before algorithms, knew the mind needs boundaries. They patrolled their thoughts like sentries, letting in only what aligned with virtue. In a coffee shop in Austin, I met a writer who swore by this. Overwhelmed by online criticism, he started a ritual. Before responding to any comment, he'd write his thoughts privately, asking if they were rooted in clarity or ego. Most didn't make the cut. The result? His public words were sharper, kinder, and his inner peace grew stronger. That's the Stoic promise. When we master our inner dialogue, we master our presence, speaking less because we need less to prove. Together, listening and inner reflection form a cycle of growth. Listening to others teaches us empathy. Listening to ourselves teaches us honesty. I think of a grandfather in rural Georgia who spent evenings on his porch, ear tuned to his grandkids' stories, heart tuned to his own memories. His quiet attention made them feel boundless. His quiet thoughts kept him grounded. The Stoics saw this balance as essential. To hear the world clearly, we must first hear ourselves. Yet this is only the start. To fully embody this wisdom, we must learn when to break our silence, to speak with courage and clarity when the moment demands it, ensuring our words carry not just truth, but transformation. We live in a world where words are cheap, tossed out in fleeting texts, impulsive posts, or heated outbursts, often forgotten as soon as they're spoken. It's easy to believe that speaking more means mattering more, that filling every silence proves your presence. But the Stoics saw through this illusion, recognizing that true impact lies not in how often you speak, but in why and how you choose to break your silence. Speaking less doesn't mean staying mute. It means speaking with intention, with a clarity forged in reflection and a purpose rooted in truth. The Stoics, those timeless guides through life's storms, reserved their voices for moments that demanded justice, reason, or compassion, always with a calm that cut through chaos. Yet even in those moments, they knew the danger of letting emotions steer the tongue. Seneca, with his piercing insight, warned that unchecked anger or fear can twist words into weapons, leaving wounds that outlast the heat of the moment. He urged us to pause, to let reason rise above impulse, ensuring our speech builds rather than breaks. Together, these principles, speaking when it matters and mastering emotions before we speak, form a path to a life of purpose and peace. Let's explore how we can wield our words like arrows aimed true, and how harnessing our emotions can transform our voice into a force for good. Imagine standing in a crowded town hall in Philadelphia, where voices clash over a community issue, tempers flaring, accusations flying, each speaker more focused on being right than being heard. The air feels thick with frustration, the kind that begs you to jump in, to raise your voice and stake your claim. But what if, instead, you waited? What if you let the noise settle, your mind sifting through the arguments, searching for truth rather than victory? This is where the Stoics shine. They didn't shy from speaking, but they spoke with purpose, choosing moments when their words could shift perspectives or defend what's right. Speaking with intention isn't about staying silent forever. It's about knowing when silence becomes cowardice, when the call for justice or clarity demands a voice. Picture a young activist in Oakland, facing a room of skeptics on a policy debate. Instead of matching their hostility, she paused, her calm presence disarming the tension. When she spoke, clear, measured, grounded in facts, her words didn't just argue a point, they inspired dialogue. That's the Stoic way, to speak not for applause, but for impact, to let your voice rise like a beacon when the moment calls. This discipline of purposeful speech is rare in our world. Scroll through any online forum, and you'll see words spilled like water. Endless threads of outrage, sarcasm, or self-promotion, each post chasing likes rather than meaning. The Stoics would shake their heads, knowing that words scattered without aim lose their power. They reserved their speech for moments that mattered, moments of moral urgency, like defending a friend's honor or challenging a harmful lie. I think of a teacher in rural Georgia who overheard students mocking a classmate's background. Instead of reacting with a lecture, she waited until class, then shared a quiet story about her own struggles growing up. Her words, deliberate and heartfelt, didn't shame anyone. They opened hearts, shifting the room's energy from cruelty to empathy. That's what speaking with intention does. It doesn't just fill space. It creates change, landing with the precision of an arrow aimed at truth. But choosing when to speak isn't enough. How we speak matters just as much. The Stoics knew emotions could hijack our words, turning them into sparks that ignite conflict rather than light. Seneca's advice to delay in anger is a lifeline here, a reminder that feelings aren't facts, and they shouldn't author our voice. Think of a time you snapped in frustration. Maybe in a traffic jam in Houston, cursing at a driver who cut you off, or during a family dinner in Chicago, where a sharp retort escalated a small disagreement. Those words, born of heat, rarely solve anything. They linger like smoke, clouding trust and leaving regret in their wake. The Stoics urge us to pause, to let the storm of emotion pass before we open our mouths. That pause isn't weakness, it's command, a choice to let reason steer instead of rage. This emotional mastery transforms how we engage with the world. Picture a manager in Seattle, facing a team upset over a canceled project. Her instinct was to defend the decision, to push back against their complaints. But she remembered a lesson from a leadership retreat. Breathe, wait, reflect. So she did. She listened to their frustrations, her silence absorbing the tension. When she spoke, her words were steady, not dismissive, but constructive, acknowledging their disappointment while outlining a path forward. Her team didn't just hear her. They trusted her, because her calm showed she valued their feelings without being ruled by her own. Seneca would nod, knowing that this gap between feeling and speaking is where wisdom grows. It's where we ask, will these words clarify or confuse, build or break? That question turns raw emotion into refined purpose. Mastering emotions before speaking isn't about suppressing what you feel. It's about channeling it responsibly. Emotions are signals, not scripts. They tell us something's at stake. Anger might flag an injustice, fear might signal a risk, but they don't dictate the best response. I saw this in a community organizer in Detroit who faced a heated protest over housing policies. The crowd was angry, ready to clash. Instead of shouting back, he stood quiet for a moment, his face showing he felt their pain. When he spoke, his voice was firm but kind, addressing their concerns with solutions, not blame. His restraint didn't dilute his passion. It amplified it, turning a volatile moment into a conversation. The Stoics knew this alchemy. Emotions, when guided by reason, fuel clarity, not chaos. They don't silence the heart. They sharpen its message. This practice takes effort, especially in a culture that glorifies instant reactions. Social media rewards the quick jab, the fiery comeback, urging us to vent before we reflect. But the Stoics challenge us to resist this pull. They'd ask us to think of words spoken in haste. Maybe a sarcastic comment to a coworker in New York that fractured a friendship, or a heated email sent in Denver that cost a deal. Those moments remind us, words born of unchecked emotion often burn more than they build. Seneca's call to delay is practical here. Try it next time you feel the heat rising. Count to 10, take a walk, or just breathe. I met a therapist in Portland who swears by this. When a client's anger triggered her own, she'd pause, sipping water to buy time. That small act let her respond with empathy instead of defensiveness, turning tense sessions into breakthroughs. That's the power of emotional discipline. It doesn't just save us from regret. It opens doors to understanding. This mastery also deepens our influence. When we speak from a place of calm, our words carry a quiet force. Think of a parent in Miami, facing a teenager's defiance. Instead of yelling, they pause, remembering a time they felt unheard as a kid. Their response, gentle but firm, doesn't escalate the fight. It invites connection. Or consider a nurse in Boston, comforting a patient's family after a loss. Her instinct was to fill the silence with assurances, but she waited, letting their grief breathe. When she spoke, her simple, "I'm here," landed like a lifeline, because it came from presence, not panic. The Stoics knew this. Words grounded in emotional clarity don't just communicate. They resonate, lingering in hearts long after they're spoken. But this isn't about perfection. We're human, emotions will flare, words will slip. The Stoics weren't immune to this either. What set them apart was their commitment to learn, to pause longer next time, to refine their voice through practice. I think of a friend, a chef in Austin, who once lashed out at a supplier over a late delivery. The fallout cost him a partnership. Instead of shrugging it off, he started a habit. When anger surged, he'd step outside, naming his emotions to himself: frustration, pride, fear. That small act, inspired by a book on Stoicism, changed how he led his kitchen. His apologies became as deliberate as his dishes, rebuilding trust with his team. That's the Stoic path, not to avoid mistakes, but to grow through them, to let each stumble teach us how to speak with greater purpose. Speaking with intention and mastering emotions are two sides of the same coin. Together, they teach us that our voice is a tool, not a reflex. In a world quick to shout, the Stoics offer a quieter strength, to speak when it serves truth, to pause when it serves peace. I saw this in a small bookstore in Minneapolis, where a poet read her work to a handful of listeners. She didn't rush to fill the silence after each line. She let it linger, her calm inviting reflection. Her words, sparse but searing, stayed with me, not because they were loud, but because they were true. That's the legacy of purposeful speech. It doesn't demand attention. It earns it, cutting through noise with the clarity of a bell. Yet this journey doesn't end with what we say or how we feel. To truly embody this wisdom, we must embrace silence not just as a pause, but as a presence. A strength that speaks louder than words ever could, revealing the depth of our character in the quiet spaces we choose to hold. In a world that equates noise with power, where the loudest voices seem to command the room, silence is often mistaken for weakness, a void where confidence should be. We're conditioned to fill every pause, to respond instantly, to prove we're engaged by adding to the clamor. But the Stoics saw silence differently, not as absence, but as a presence pulsing with strength. To them, staying quiet amid chaos was an act of resilience, a deliberate choice to preserve clarity over conflict. Silence, in their hands, became a tool for composure, a shield against the pull of petty disputes, and a wellspring of credibility that spoke louder than any shout. And from this quiet strength grows something even more enduring, a reputation for thoughtfulness. Those who speak sparingly but with depth leave a mark not just in moments, but in memories, building trust through words that resonate with authenticity. The Stoics knew that influence isn't won by volume. It's earned by care, by listening, by choosing words that carry truth. Let's explore how silence becomes a force of its own, and how thoughtfulness crafts a legacy that lingers long after the conversation fades, weaving a path to a life of quiet power and lasting impact. Picture yourself in a heated debate at a community center in Charlotte, where voices overlap, each one sharper than the last, as neighbors argue over a local policy. The room crackles with tension, and you feel the urge to jump in, to defend your view, to counter a jab, to be heard. It's natural. We're wired to react, especially when emotions run high. But what if you held back? What if, instead of fueling the fire, you stood steady, your silence a calm anchor in the storm? The Stoics would see this as strength, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that endures. Silence, they taught, isn't surrender. It's sovereignty, a refusal to let the world's chaos dictate your response. It's the choice to conserve your energy for clarity, to step back from the fray and see the bigger picture. I saw this once in a small diner in Memphis, where a waitress faced a customer's tirade over a delayed order. Instead of snapping back, she paused, her face calm but firm. Her silence wasn't defeat. It was dignity, disarming his anger without a word. When she finally spoke, her quiet apology turned his scowl into a nod. That's the power of silence. It doesn't just diffuse. It commands respect. This kind of silence is rare because it's hard. Our culture celebrates the quick retort. Think of the viral clapbacks on social media, racking up likes for their bite, or the pundits on cable news, filling airtime with endless arguments. Silence feels risky, like you're fading into the background. But the Stoics knew better. They saw it as resilience, a way to stay centered when others spiral. Imagine a family reunion in Houston, where old grudges bubble up over dinner. One relative baits another, words laced with sarcasm. Most jump in, escalating the tension, but one person stays quiet, not out of fear but choice. Their silence isn't empty. It's full, signaling they won't trade peace for provocation. Later, when they speak, a gentle question that shifts the mood, the table softens. That's what silence does. It holds the higher ground, not by force, but by focus. It says, "I'm here, but I choose calm over chaos." Silence like this isn't passive, it's active, a discipline that reshapes how we engage. In a startup office in Austin, I watched a young designer transform a chaotic brainstorming session. As colleagues talked over each other, pitching half-formed ideas, she stayed quiet, scribbling notes. Her silence wasn't disengagement. It was observation, soaking in every perspective. When she finally spoke, a single, clear suggestion. It tied the room's ideas together, earning nods from even the loudest voices. The Stoics would recognize this as silence's gift. It lets you see what others miss, gathering insights while they're busy shouting. It's like standing on a hiking trail in Colorado, pausing to take in the view while others rush ahead. That pause doesn't slow you down. It deepens your understanding, letting you move forward with purpose. This quiet strength builds something else, too, credibility. When you don't speak just to be heard, your words gain weight. People notice. They lean in not because you're loud, but because you're rare. I think of a librarian in rural Ohio who rarely spoke at town meetings but was always invited to weigh in. Why? Because her silence signaled thoughtfulness. And when she spoke, measured, kind, grounded in reason, her words carried authority. The Stoics knew this instinctively. They didn't waste breath on gossip or petty disputes, because they understood that silence raises the value of speech. It's like saving your best ingredients for a special dish. When you finally serve it, everyone savors it. In a world drowning in noise, where every app and ad fights for attention, this rarity is magnetic. It draws people to you not because you demand it, but because you've earned it. From this foundation of silence grows a reputation for thoughtfulness, a legacy that outlives fleeting moments. We all know someone whose words linger, not because they talk the most, but because they mean the most. Maybe it's a coworker in Seattle who remembers a casual comment you made months ago, bringing it up with a smile that says they were listening. Or a neighbor in Atlanta who, after a quick chat on the porch, sends a note referencing your shared love of gardening. These small acts of care build trust, turning passing conversations into lasting bonds. The Stoics saw thoughtfulness as a craft, honed by listening deeply and speaking deliberately. It's not about being clever or charismatic. It's about being present, about showing others their words matter. Seneca wrote that understanding is the root of connection, and thoughtfulness is how we plant that root, letting it grow into relationships that endure. This reputation isn't built overnight. It's forged in quiet choices, like recalling a friend's worry during a coffee catch-up in Portland or asking a colleague in Chicago about their kid's soccer game. These moments seem small, but they're profound. They show you weren't just hearing, you were absorbing, valuing, remembering. I saw this in a teacher in rural Minnesota who kept a notebook of her students' interests. A favorite book, a dream job, a quiet fear. Months later, she'd reference those details in class, sparking shy smiles from kids who felt invisible. Her thoughtfulness didn't just teach lessons. It built confidence, showing her students they mattered. The Stoics would nod, knowing that thoughtfulness turns words into gifts, each one wrapped in care, delivered with intention. Thoughtfulness also amplifies influence. In a world quick to judge, where online debates spiral into noise, the thoughtful voice stands out, not for its volume, but for its depth. Think of a community leader in Miami who rarely spoke at public forums but was always quoted in the local paper. Why? Because her words, born from listening to every side, cut through division with clarity. Her reputation wasn't loud, it was solid, built on a foundation of care. The Stoics understood this. Influence grows not from dominating, but from contributing. When you speak less but mean more, people don't just hear you, they seek you out. I met a retiree in Tucson who volunteered at a food bank, known for his quiet demeanor. He rarely spoke, but when he did, thanking a donor, encouraging a struggling family, his words carried a warmth that lingered. Volunteers called him the heart of the operation, not because he led with fanfare, but because his thoughtfulness steadied everyone around him. This legacy of thoughtfulness transforms how we're remembered. In a boardroom in San Francisco, I watched a seasoned executive navigate a tense merger discussion. While others argued, he listened, jotting notes. When he spoke, a concise summary that acknowledged every concern. The room exhaled, unified by his clarity. Months later, colleagues still referenced that moment, not because he dazzled, but because he grounded them. The Stoics knew this power. Thoughtful words don't just solve problems. They inspire trust, creating ripples that outlast the speaker. It's like planting a tree whose shade you'll never sit under. Your care shapes the future, even when you're gone. In a small bookstore in Boston, I overheard a poet share a line about her late grandmother. She didn't say much, but when she did, you felt the world shift. That's the Stoic ideal. A voice so thoughtful it echoes through time. Building this reputation takes practice. It's in the pause before you reply to a heated email, the choice to ask a question instead of asserting a point. I think of a nurse in Denver who made a habit of repeating patients' worries back to them, ensuring she understood. Her small act of care, listening, reflecting, responding, made her a favorite on the ward, not for her skill alone, but for her presence. The Stoics would see this as virtue in action. Thoughtfulness isn't just about what you say, but how you make others feel seen, valued, understood. It's a discipline that grows stronger with each choice, each moment you choose depth over distraction. Silence and thoughtfulness, together, weave a life of quiet power. Silence gives us the space to see clearly. Thoughtfulness gives us the tools to act wisely. They remind us that influence isn't about being the loudest. It's about being the truest. In a world that rushes to speak, the Stoics offer a gentler strength. To hold back until your words are ready. To listen until your heart is open. Yet this journey doesn't end with reputation. To fully embody this wisdom, we must learn to communicate beyond words, to let our presence speak, and to master the art of saying only what matters, with a clarity that cuts through the noise like a beacon. We live in a world that thrives on distraction, where screens flicker with endless updates, and conversations are often drowned out by the hum of our own thoughts. It's easy to believe that to connect, we must speak. Fill the air with words, stories, or arguments to prove we're here. But the Stoics saw a deeper truth. Sometimes the most powerful way to show up isn't through what we say, but through how we are. Presence, undivided, intentional, rooted in the moment, speaks louder than any monologue, forging bonds that words alone can't touch. It's the quiet gift of attention, the act of being fully with someone, that makes them feel seen, valued, alive. And when we do choose to speak, the Stoics remind us to do so with precision, to carve our words down to their essence, letting brevity become the vessel for wisdom. Saying less but meaning more is the mark of a mind refined, a life deliberate. Together, presence and brevity form the capstone of Stoic practice, teaching us to live not just loudly, but deeply. Let's explore how our quiet attention can build trust beyond language, and how the art of saying only what matters can transform our words into lasting echoes of truth. Imagine sitting in a cozy cafe in Portland, the kind where rain taps the windows and the smell of coffee grounds lingers. Across from you is a friend, their eyes tracing the rim of their mug as they share a worry. A job loss, a family strain, a quiet fear they've held too long. You could jump in with advice, fill the pause with your own story, or check your phone for a quick escape. But instead, you stay still. You nod, your gaze steady, your silence saying, "I'm here." That moment, stripped of words, is presence. Raw, generous, alive. The Stoics knew this power intuitively. They believed that showing up fully, without distraction, was a form of communication more profound than eloquence. It's not about what you say, it's about what you embody. Your friend feels it not because you've solved their problem, but because you've given them something rare. The weight of your attention, the assurance that they matter. In a world fractured by notifications and half-listened chats, this presence is a gift that lingers, a memory of being truly seen. Presence like this isn't just kind, it's transformative. Think of a time someone gave you their full focus. Maybe it was a teacher in Atlanta who stopped mid-lesson to hear your question. Their eyes locked on yours as if the room had faded away. or a stranger in a Chicago bookstore who paused their browsing to share a laugh over a quirky book title, their warmth turning a fleeting moment into a connection. These encounters stay with us, not for their length, but for their depth. The Stoics saw presence as a discipline, a choice to set aside your ego and meet someone where they are. I saw this in a community garden in Denver, where a volunteer worked alongside kids planting seedlings. She didn't lecture or correct. She listened, smiled, watched their hands dig into the soil. Her quiet focus made them beam, not because she praised them, but because her presence said, "You're enough." That's what presence does. It creates a space where others can unfold, free from judgment or rush. This act of showing up fully builds trust in ways words often fail to do. In a hospital waiting room in Miami, I watched a nurse sit with a nervous family. She didn't offer long reassurances or medical jargon, just a steady gaze and a gentle nod as they spoke of their fears. Her presence, calm and undivided, eased their tension more than any speech could. The Stoics would recognize this as communication beyond language, a silent affirmation that says, "I see you." It's a gift that costs nothing but feels like everything, especially in a culture where attention is sliced thin by texts and to-do lists. When we're present, we don't just hear, we absorb, catching the tremor in a voice, the hope behind a hesitant smile. I think of a barista in Seattle who remembered a regular's order and asked about their day with such genuine care that they left smiling, not just for the coffee, but for the moment of connection. Presence turns strangers into allies, moments into memories, because it signals respect without needing to say a word. But presence isn't just about others. It's a mirror for ourselves. To be fully here, we must quiet the noise within. Those mental checklists, worries, or rehearsals for what we'll say next. The Stoics practiced this inward focus, grounding themselves in the moment to see clearly. In a park in Minneapolis, I met a jogger who swore by silent runs, leaving his earbuds behind to feel the rhythm of his breath, the crunch of leaves underfoot. He said it made him sharper at work, more patient at home, because presence taught him to notice what mattered. This Stoic discipline isn't easy in a world that pulls us in 1,000 directions, but it's powerful. Try it next time you're with someone. Put your phone face down, let your thoughts settle, and just be. You'll find that presence doesn't just connect you to them, it reconnects you to yourself, rooting you in the now with a clarity that feels like freedom. And when the time comes to speak, the Stoics urge us to do so with an economy that amplifies impact. Brevity isn't the enemy of wisdom. It's its ally, a way to distill thought into something sharp, clear, unforgettable. We've all heard speeches that ramble, emails that bury their point, conversations that drift into noise. But then there's the voice that cuts through. A single sentence, precise and potent, that shifts everything. Picture a boardroom in San Francisco, where a team debates a failing project, voices piling up with excuses and plans. One member, quiet until now, says, "Let's focus on what we can fix today." The room stills. That brevity, born of reflection, doesn't just clarify, it leads. The Stoics mastered this art, choosing words like a sculptor chisels stone, removing excess to reveal truth. Marcus Aurelius didn't fill pages with grand prose. His meditations are spare, each line heavy with intent. Brevity, to him, was a discipline, a way to honor the listener's time and the speaker's purpose. This craft of saying less is rare today. Scroll through any group chat or social media feed, and you'll see words spilling over. Long rants, tangents, emojis cluttering the point. We're taught that more is better, that volume signals passion. But the Stoics disagreed. They saw brevity as elegance, a way to make every syllable count. I think of a poet in New Orleans, reading at a dimly lit bar. Her poems were short, some just a few lines, but each word landed like a spark, igniting gasps from the crowd. She told me later she spent hours cutting, refining, until only the essence remained. That's Stoic brevity, not poverty of speech, but wealth of thought, a commitment to say only what's true, necessary, useful. In a world that rewards excess, this restraint feels radical, like a clean line drawn through chaos. Brevity also deepens our influence. When we speak sparingly, our words become events, moments others anticipate because they know we won't waste their time. In a classroom in rural Georgia, I saw a teacher transform her students with this approach. She rarely lectured, instead posing brief questions or sharing one-sentence stories that tied to the lesson. Her economy made every word a hook, pulling kids into learning because they trusted her to deliver meaning. The Stoics knew this power. Scarcity adds significance. Think of a mentor in Chicago who offered feedback in crisp phrases, "Trust your gut here," or "Simplify this step." That stuck with you longer than any speech. Brevity doesn't dilute. It distills, turning words into tools that carve clarity, not clutter. But brevity isn't about being curt or cold. It's about care. It's asking, how can I say this in a way that honors the moment? In a hospital in Boston, a doctor faced a patient's family with tough news. Instead of a long explanation, he said, "We're doing everything we can, and I'm here with you." Those few words, chosen with precision, didn't overwhelm. They comforted, because they carried truth without excess. The Stoics would see this as virtue, speech that serves, not self. I met a park ranger in Colorado who embodied this. Guiding hikers, he'd share brief insights about the land. A sentence about a tree's history, a phrase about the sky's mood that made every step feel sacred. His brevity wasn't rushed. It was reverent, proving that less can hold more when it's shaped by intent. Mastering brevity takes practice, especially when emotions tempt us to ramble. We've all been there, pouring out a long defense in a tense meeting or sending a sprawling text to explain a misunderstanding. But the Stoics urge us to pause, to refine. Try it. Next time you're about to speak, ask, "Can I say this in half the words?" In a startup in Austin, I watched a founder pitch her idea to investors. Her first draft was a 10-minute monologue, packed with details. After feedback, she cut it to 3 minutes, each sentence sharp, every pause deliberate. The investors didn't just fund her, they trusted her, because her brevity signaled confidence. That's the Stoic lesson. Short isn't shallow, it's strong. A sign you've done the work to know what matters. Together, presence and brevity weave a life of quiet power. Presence grounds us in the moment, letting us connect without forcing our voice. Brevity sharpens that voice, ensuring it lands with purpose. In a world that shouts, the Stoics offer a gentler strength. To be fully here, to say only what's true. I saw this in a grandfather in rural Ohio, telling bedtime stories to his grandkids. He'd sit close, his eyes bright, sharing tales in sparse, vivid sentences that held them spellbound. His presence made them feel safe. His brevity made the stories soar. That's the legacy of Stoic wisdom. A life where every glance, every word, builds something lasting. This journey through Stoic principles, silence, restraint, listening, inner clarity, purposeful speech, emotional mastery, thoughtful presence, and concise wisdom, paints a portrait of a life well lived. It's not about withdrawing from the world, but engaging with it deliberately, with a heart open and a mind refined. From the quiet strength of holding back to the gentle power of being present, each step builds on the last, creating a tapestry of connection and meaning. I think of a small-town librarian in Minnesota, whose quiet demeanor and careful words turned her library into a haven. She listened to every visitor, spoke only when needed, and left each person feeling brighter. Her life, like the Stoics, was a testament to this truth. Power doesn't come from noise, but from purpose. As we navigate our own chaotic world, let's carry this wisdom. Be present, be brief, be true. In doing so, we don't just speak to others, we speak to eternity, leaving footprints of clarity and care that echo long after we're gone. As we stand at the end of this journey through Stoic wisdom, we find ourselves not at a destination, but at a beginning, a threshold where silence, restraint, listening, inner clarity, purposeful speech, emotional mastery, thoughtful presence, and concise wisdom converge to form a life of meaning. This path, carved by the likes of Marcus Aurelius, EPICTETUS, and SENECA, isn't about retreating from the world's noise, but about rising above it with a quiet strength that reshapes how we live, connect, and endure. We began with silence, not as absence, but as a superpower, a deliberate pause that sharpens our thoughts and anchors our presence. From there, we learned restraint, the art of holding back to see clearly, letting our words carry weight through intention rather than impulse. Listening became a virtue, a bridge to understanding others, while our inner dialogue, disciplined like a garden, rooted out chaos to cultivate peace. We discovered the courage to speak when truth demanded it, tempered by emotional mastery that ensures our words build rather than break. Silence revealed itself as resilience, thoughtfulness as a legacy, presence as a language beyond speech, and brevity as wisdom's finest vessel. Each lesson, like a thread, weaves a tapestry of a life lived deliberately, not loud, but deep, not scattered, but whole. Imagine walking through a bustling street in New York, phones buzzing, voices overlapping, the world pulling you in every direction. Yet within you is a stillness, a clarity honed by these Stoic practices. You pause before speaking, listen with your heart, reflect before reacting, and choose words that matter. This isn't just philosophy. It's a way of being, a compass for navigating life's storms with grace. Picture a moment from your own life, a tense meeting in Seattle, a heated family dinner in Chicago, a quiet coffee with a friend in Austin. In each, you have a choice, to add to the noise or to offer something rarer: presence, care, truth. The Stoics remind us that every interaction is a chance to build, to connect, to leave a mark that lingers not because it was loud, but because it was true. This journey teaches us that power lies not in dominating, but in understanding. Not in shouting, but in showing up fully, with a mind clear and a heart open. So how do we carry this wisdom into our modern lives, where screens flicker and schedules race? Start small, but start now. In a world that glorifies hustle, give yourself permission to pause. 5 seconds before answering a text, a deep breath before joining a debate. Try it at a diner in Atlanta or a park in Denver. Put your phone down, look someone in the eye, and listen without planning your reply. You'll be amazed at what you hear: the tremor in a coworker's voice, the joy behind a stranger's story. At home, carve out a moment each day to reflect, like Marcus did, asking yourself, what's driving me today? Is it truth or ego, fear or purpose? Journal your answers not to perform but to grow. When emotions surge, anger in a traffic jam in Los Angeles, frustration in a meeting in Miami, count to 10, let reason rise. And when you speak, aim for brevity, stripping away fluff to let your truth shine. These aren't grand gestures. They're quiet choices, but they ripple. They turn fleeting moments into lasting connections, chaotic days into grounded ones. In your professional life, embody thoughtfulness. In a startup in San Francisco or a classroom in Minneapolis, listen more than you lecture, ask questions that draw out ideas, and speak only when it clarifies. You'll find your influence grows, not because you demand attention, but because you offer value. In friendships, be the one who remembers. A name, a worry, a dream shared over coffee in Portland. That care builds trust deeper than any speech. And in your quiet moments, whether on a subway in Boston or a porch in rural Georgia, practice presence. Feel your breath, notice the world, the hum of life, the weight of now. These practices don't require wealth or status, just intention. They're available to anyone, anywhere, from a barista in Seattle to a retiree in Tucson. They cost nothing but give everything: clarity, connection, a life aligned with what matters. This Stoic path isn't about perfection. You'll stumble, snap in anger, ramble when you meant to be brief, drift when you meant to be present. That's okay. The Stoics weren't flawless. They were human, striving, learning. Each misstep is a chance to refine, to ask, how can I do better? In a world that rushes past mistakes, this willingness to grow is your strength. It's what makes you not just a speaker, but a listener. Not just a voice, but a presence. Not just a person, but a light. So take this wisdom into your days, your conversations, your quiet nights. Let it guide you through the noise, not to escape it, but to transform it into understanding, into purpose, into peace. To everyone watching on ZenLite 8, thank you for walking this path with us, for seeking a life of depth in a world of distraction. If this journey resonated with you, hit that subscribe button to join our community. We're here to explore wisdom that lights the way, one video at a time. Share this with someone who needs a moment of clarity, someone ready to trade noise for meaning. And in the comments below, leave one word that captures what you're taking from this: presence. Let's inspire each other to show up fully, to live not just loudly, but truly. Until next time, keep seeking the simple truth that guides us home.